Tonight, a Special 4 Investigates report. We have teamed up with the nonprofit newsroom ProPublica to examine the toxic legacy of uranium mining and milling here in New Mexico. I mean, that boom has long since gone bust, and what's left behind is a mess that is still being addressed. As Matt Grubbs explains, one company is ready to just walk away.
Clean air and clean water. We hardly think about them until they're threatened.
And they don't understand the impact that this could have on their future water supplies.
This is a story about living in the face of that threat.
A massive environmental and public health problem.
At the base of a 22 million ton toxic pile of uranium mill tailings. It's a story about what's left behind when the jobs disappear, who's responsible, and when it's safe to walk away.
Such a mess. It's hard to believe.
For 3 decades at the height of the Cold War, New Mexico helped power first the country's nuclear weapons and then its nuclear power plants.
Our country is dependent upon the uranium industry.
But even as the radioactive boom began, there were signs of a painful bust to come. ProPublica's team found less than 2 years after Milan's Homestake Mill started churning out yellowcake in 1958, regulators knew the site was contaminating groundwater. Since the nuclear era began, government watchdogs have promised safety.
Groundwater in the area is constantly monitored to see that it does not ever contain more than permissible amounts of radioactivity.
Those assurances now sound quaint. For more than 60 years, uranium and other dangerous elements have continuously seeped into the water tables below the Homestake tailings pile, while radon has seeped from above it. In the 5 subdivisions nearby, cancer and thyroid disease are so prevalent, the community created what it calls a death map. Candace Head Dilla used to live there.
The mother and father died, and the one I told you my age is dead.
And knows the map almost by heart.
Breast cancer over there. My mom had breast cancer. I have no thyroid over there, thyroid problems. I mean,
promised cleanup still is not done. Last year, the New Mexico Environment Department noted at least 9 billion gallons of clean, drinkable water, quote, has been used extensively to try to manage contamination. But neighbors also have plenty of criticism for the government agencies who are supposed to make sure it's safe to be there.
So you just think, United States regulators can't possibly think that this is okay.
The tailings pile has been a Superfund site for almost 40 years. But the state only recently banned residential wells. Federal agencies, Candace says, haven't been any better.
For years, we feel like the NRC colluded with the company. It was like the NRC was not a regulatory agency. They were boosters.
The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, however, says underground water flow near the tailings pile is especially complex, and the agency is focused on health, not deadlines. Homestake is now asking the NRC to call off the cleanup. In a statement, the company said, quote, "The site is at a point where it is not technically feasible to provide additional, sustainable improvements to water quality."
What Homestake wants to do now is to essentially ask the government to legalize the pollution that is under and around the tailings pile in the groundwater through what they call alternative concentration limits.
Chris Shuey of the Southwest Research and Information Center says the common tactic rewrites the rules for how much uranium pollution is acceptable, allowing Homestake to walk away from further cleanup costs. While the company has not yet resolved the groundwater issue, it's taken a different approach when it comes to the people affected. To prove to federal regulators that the site is no longer a threat to human health, a Homestake could make it healthy. Or the company could try to do something with the humans.
When the fields were green, and it's beautiful. It was where I thought I would always, always live. But
ProPublica spoke with dozens of nearby homeowners and discovered the company has been buying out property owners near the tailings piles and ponds at a furious pace, demolishing some of what it acquires. By the time Homestake closed the books last year, it owned more than 8 of every 10 parcels, some 14,000 acres, with 123 properties left to buy. Candace Head-Dilla's family built her home.
From the ground up, we laid all the blocks, did all the cement work, we framed it.
Her parents lived right across the street, and it seemed like she'd stay there forever.
Those are my daughters. She had these she did a science fair project, and then we planted her trees afterwards, and they grew up.
With health problems of her own and more out every window, it seemed too dangerous to stay. Her family sold. Eventually, perhaps everyone will go, leaving behind a ghost town in the shadow of the toxic tailings.
If this ends up happening and the government awards these alternative concentration limits, essentially that tailings pile and its groundwater contamination will be left there.
A legacy site for future generations. Homestake says the contaminated water is unlikely to move very far, very fast. The towns and pueblos below the plume, though, have said they're concerned about those projections. Whether the government believes the company's projections will determine whether Homestake gets to walk away. In Milan, Matt Grubbs for Investigates.
And we will continue to follow the impact of the uranium industry here in New Mexico, as well as our partners at ProPublica. If your story should be part of the investigation and you've worked with any public agencies, consulting firms, tribes, or companies, contact For Investigates, or you can go to ProPublica.org/uranium.